Welcome to Fabrice Poussin's book launch with Silver Bow Publishing. We're excited to celebrate this new release, The Temptation of Silence. My name is Megan Hakkinen. I'm a two-time world champion endurance cyclist and the author of 2 adventure cycling memoirs. Silver Bow Publishing is an independent creative book publisher committed to publishing great literature in all genres. Candace James is at the helm of Silver Bow Publishing as general manager. Silver Bow is located in Greater Vancouver, British Columbia, and typically publishes both fiction and poetry, 20 to 30 books annually by emerging and established international writers. Silver Bow books are available in print retail bookstores and libraries worldwide. And if you'd like to purchase a print version of The Temptation of Silence, please contact your local bookstore and ask them to order the copy in from Ingram Distribution. You can also purchase the book directly from the publisher if you prefer at silverbowpublishing.com, and the ebook is available on Amazon. I'll invite Candace to say a few words now.
Yes, well, it's my pleasure to publish yet another book by the fabulous writer and poet Fabrice Poussin. And although poetry is never a big seller, it's always thrilling when you find a writer who just can touch every nerve, and you read through and you think, this is great stuff. That's what I found with Fabrice's first book, second book, third book, and fourth book. And just for the record, so everybody knows, his first book with Silver Bow was in 2021, and it was called In Absentia. His second book, it was called If I Had a Gun. I love that title. I've thought that so many times myself. And in 2023 was Half Past Life, and 2024 was the one he's launching today, The Temptation of Silence. A wonderful writer, a wonderful, interesting person, and just a real gem to the human race. So I shall turn it back to Megan to introduce Fabrice.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Candace. We're really excited to have you here today to speak a little bit about our poet. So without further ado, I'll introduce Fabrice. Fabrice Poussin teaches French and English at Shorter University, author of novels and poetry. His work has appeared in Kestrel, Symposium, Le Pensée Universelle, Paris, The Chimes, the Shorter University award-winning poetry and arts publication, and many other magazines. His photography has been published in the Front Porch Review, the San Pedro River Review, as well as other publications. We're really excited to hear from your newest collection, The Temptation of Silence.
Well, you had also indicated that I could read perhaps from former books before in an email, so I'll probably do that later. But since you asked me to start with this one, the first one I'll read is actually one of the first poems in the collection, and it's called Pepe Moustache. And it was inspired by a cousin of mine, actually, because my grandfather died a long time ago. But I happened to have his picture ID, and I still have it with me. And I posted it on Facebook, and she saw it, and I never knew him, but she did. And she told me that she called him Pepe Moustache. So I decided to write about him, although I never knew him. So this is how this one goes. Pepe Moustache. I never knew the great man who would have towered over the child. I was to be in the footsteps of this silhouette of 5 feet and 2 inches. Running before the war machines of Verdun, dodging steel, copper, and gas, he fell more than 30 years later, soaked with the liquor he never drank. Quite late to make your acquaintance, I must have come crying into the arms of a son who mourned you for so many lonely years. Your eyes so kind above a faint smile, did you know as you trimmed the thick mustache that life was to be so hard for your sweet soul? You never knew me, dear Pepe Moustache, yet I thank you for the son you made, the gentle gaze you gave him, a warmth only you could possess. And so it goes through our generations, an old photograph barely faded, and perhaps you look down upon us, my father, in your arms once again. So I want to add to this that, of course, his son is my father, and my father has, of course, passed on, which is why he would be in his arms. And this grandfather actually committed suicide, which is why I said he was drowned in liquor he never drank, because he just drank to die, but he never drank, otherwise. So I never knew him, but I saw his photograph, and I spoke with my father about him, and he appeared to have been a very, very sweet man who just was overwhelmed with life. So, and the next one is actually on the next page. It's called The Simpleton. So these are going to have to do a lot with childhood memories. Pepe Moustache was not, but it's still my own life. The Simpleton is about another friend whom I had. He was some kind of a friend when I was in elementary school. And there may be a pattern here, but he also killed himself for love. And it's called The Simpleton because he was 2 or 3 years behind in school. 14 going on 10, dreaming in the 3rd grade again, books in a hunting bag, only memory of the long-gone father. Towering near the blackboard, staring at endless lines, problems for young Einstein, he may cry if only he knew how. Too old for a friend, too young for loneliness, trapped in a space without hope, dreams a secret to his kind. He waltzed through the courtyard, attempting to keep his balance, in a town too small for his stature, racing home as he sped to the unknown. Never to become an old man, seeking love in his despaired hours, he died on her doorstep with his book bag and few memories. So he didn't have the book bag when he died. He died when he was about 17, but that's how I remembered him. So, and occasionally I have a more humorous one. And the next one I'm going to read is called 23. And if you ask anybody who knows me here how old I am, if they don't answer 23, they'll have to speak to me personally, because that's how old I am, that's how old I've been. For how long, I will not say, but as you probably suspect, it's more than just a year or two. So this one, as I said, is a bit more humorous, I think. 23. My tombstone will only bear a number, questioned by the passers-by. Born in the 20th, died in the mid-21st, aged 23. Graced by a little of chaos and peace, I realized so little I knew in delight, and I could learn endless, that math may not rule my days. Those who look at me will frown at what they consider poor humor, and I will spread my sorrow for them at the foot of the infinite. Of course, I own the gray as well as the grooves imposed by decades, yet I saunter amongst the giants of the forest, a child still. Mature kin may grin at my antics. So unreasonable I will appear. I will continue on my path, a stumble here, a fall there. Not certain that I will ever die, this heart will have no regrets until, perhaps, it is that I could have loved you sooner. So again, I think this is much happier. You know, being 23 always is fun. So my students know that, and they may not forget. Today I was listening to, I think, I'm not sure what it was, but there is one of my favorite songs by Bob Dylan is Knocking on Heaven's Door. And I think it's a beautiful song. And I'm about to teach Bob Dylan since he won the Nobel Prize, and that will be one of the songs I play. So knocking at my door. When you come knocking at my door, I may not always be there. When you come knocking at my life, I may have stepped out for a moment. When you reach palm up for a gift, as you merely seek to help me, when you change your pose in the light, forgive my ignorance of your language. If you attempt to peer into my soul, as I look away without a hint, if you take another step closer to my shadow, forgive me if I feel the invader of your world. The day you open your gates wide, you might see me bowing before you, for the scars of decades do not vanish so fast, and I will remain in disbelief of my fortune. Please come back and knock again upon this door, too solid, made to survive many battles, for the warrior inside is weary and longs to tear down the fortress he never meant to erect there. Okay, let's see. I've marked a few. To Charles. So one, of course, I lived in Paris, France, since I was born around there. And I'm very familiar with Hemingway's work and the lives of Americans there in the 20th century. And I'm not just fascinated by it, but I think they show us a lot about the Paris that we may not otherwise know. Now, this one is not Hemingway, but it's Charles Baudelaire. And I wrote my dissertation on him. He was, to me, one of the greatest poets who ever lived. And he lived in the 19th century. And he wrote about Paris quite a lot because he lived there most of his life. So this one is called To Charles. Shadow of Parisian nights, you haunt the city of lights with your images of the poor, the prostitutes, and the dying. Evocations of the sublime, in emanations of the putrescent, you took us on unexpected journeys in cities, devoured by the magnificent maggots. Your gaze still pierces through the many portraits left behind, from beyond in the frigid residence, under the soil of Montparnasse. The genius of your rhymes echoes with the power of the eternal in a language universal, crossing all that is relative. As your heart really ceased to sing beneath the mysterious chest, you who speaks to all through the ages of the implacable loneliness of this earth, sad man gifted with the passion of a nation, I can only imagine a glass of absinthe with you in a remote corner of your favorite dive. So some of the words in there, you notice the word maggots. It's not very pretty, putrescent. But those are words that he used in his poetry because he saw modern society, the society of the 1900s, really rotting and in full decadence. And that's what he described in a lot of his poems. Another one this is not about Paris, this is about ancient scholars. And this one is inspired by people like C.S. Lewis, because I've read most of his books. My intention before I die is to have read every single one of them. And I imagine him and his friends, like Tolkien and others, sitting and smoking cigars, and he smoked cigarettes actually, and drinking, I think, whiskey or whatever they drink in England. So it's to the ancient scholars. Dust plays tricks on their weary gazes, alone in the ivory towers of their genius. The world may run topsy-turvy around their homes. Unaffected, they seem frozen in the cradle of oldest dreams. Lost in the midst of a cloud of stale smoke, pipes lay cold atop the pages of an antique volume, holding secrets of universes far away, in strange arabesques and magic formulas. They may still smoke from time to time, holding the rare cigarettes allowed by an old friend. Their hair gray for a little while longer floats above the vivid thoughts of their youths. Drinks have dried in the hazy glass. Cubes of ice wait for a spiritual marriage as the light of those electric candles dim. On a word, few still share with these relics. Perhaps the last cigar will brighten the final years, spent in secret within the oaken walls of a fortress built with decades of joy, in a 1,000-year-old castle made for giants. Those beautiful minds buried beneath the silver, the white, and the bold seem meek to the masses who have merely begun. Still, they hold the wealth of all generations as they quietly conceive miracles for endless futures. So I hope that you're all familiar with the works of Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and others. When I was last year, we had this celebration with another poet, and he was talking to us about writing about our teachers. Or I don't know if it was teachers, but it was people, and I decided to do that. So I wrote a number of poems about my old teachers. And this one is called Good Old Jack. And Jack was, I'm pretty sure he's not alive anymore, was a friend of Stanley Kubrick's. He went to school with Stanley Kubrick, and I will never forget that because I'm sure you know Stanley Kubrick, the great film director. And he was from Brooklyn, New York. And Jack was a different kind of professor in a graduate class, 4 of us plus him. And he was very close to us. So this one is called Good Old Jack. He knew Stanley in his high school days, so he did, and that made him a king. But while Stanley made movies not too far from Simon and Art, what did Jack do? Jack read books so he could master the romantics and their thoughts. So he shared what he had learned, his hand upon mine, as if I asked. Old man with a mustache, thin a la birds of a feather. Whatever are you up to, old Jack? Stanley's gone, and so are you, I think. As I can recall, all I can recall, is that word on page 500 of the unending Emile, and your sweaty palm. So the story here is that he would ask us questions, and if you ever read anything by Rousseau, these books are super thick, and he would ask us a question about a word on a certain page, and of course I had no idea. And the idea of the mustache, a la birds of a feather, you may have seen the film. There were two versions of it, and his touching hands, he was an interesting guy. I'll stop at that. The next one, since we talked about TikTok before, I haven't reread it, but since we talked about that, I decided that I would read it now. So it's called TikTok CC, TikTok KK, as time goes by, I suppose. They live at the altar of their newest derision, rushing to the smart device and a spot in the sun, enthralled by their own image in cyberspace, centers of the only universe they care to know. They live, you see, an incredible life in the absence of thought or reflection, posing as if statues of the classics, Mona Lisas, of a long-gone Renaissance. Soon, their charade will adorn the fragile walls of binary fragments long enough until another surges with a lower cut top and more for all to see, moving pathetic steps as if a grandiose dance. Long ago, spirits vanished, leaving souls devoid of humanity. Now they roam the membranes of a strange galaxy, unable to find anchor in even the shallowest of grooves, upon lines of a story written on virtual parchment. Time clicks away at a faster pace, out of reach of these odd creatures who know nothing of human existence and seek fame in 5 seconds of an awkward dance. Many, like them, know an existence of make-believe, empty shells in the flesh of little starlets. They smile and scream to be the ones everyone sees, only to return to the dust that never rose above the sewers. I want to read this one because If I Had a Gun is probably one of my favorite. And I have to admit, I've written a number of other poems that begin with, if I had something. And I can't remember all of them at this point. But somebody asked me a question once in a reading, why didn't you write one that would be called If I Had a Guillotine? I thought that was the silliest question ever. But I did eventually write one, which includes a guillotine, actually. But this one, If I Had a Gun, I love this because it's, I think, sweet. And it's obviously, I don't think Canada is the same, but in the United States, as you know, we are a gun country. There's no doubt about it. There's definitely more guns than people. People have arsenals in their homes. I used to own one, but I sold it. And I think that now I would like to have one again. But this is the kind of gun I would like to have. So if I had a gun, it would have 9 chambers, one made of chocolate and another of caramel. If I had a weapon like that, I would dip it in a white cream made of whipped butter and powdered sugar. If I owned a revolver, it would sing with every shot, a melody made in heaven, every night before I dream. If I had an instrument of death in my bedroom, I would devour it with strawberries and smile with every bite at that silly lady with a sigh. But you will find nothing of the sort in my humble abode, unless, of course, you think of ice cream as a deadly nectar. So again, this is a little bit more humorous, because I do like to have fun sometimes with poems. This one is probably going to be really hard to read. Let me read, so this is also from this collection, because this is one where I have a number of poems that have to do with Paris, and one of them is Paname, another one has to do with Toulouse-Lautrec, but this one is Kid, and this one is about my dad, because I wrote a number of poems about him. He was a great guy. He was a farmer, and he could have gone to school, but there was a war, and he was a child at the time, and the war said, no more school for you. So he stayed home and became a farmer, and then delivered mail for a year and then had to go into the army and then came back and took the farm over. But he was a very, very successful farmer, which allowed me to come and study here. So it's called Kid. Kid never grew up, the little farmer boy, under a rough shell of a man, rugged and hard at work. A little farmer boy, skin so thick with weather, old cuts barely healed, under new signatures of time. What happened to pain and to tiredness, little farmer boy had not a moment. Hands obeyed the heart, legs followed the soul, and once in a while the sweetness of a breath. Barely clothed enough in a cold snap of winter, mittens somewhere forgotten, and the roar of the engine. Eyes so sharp to the horizon, full of a light without end, never losing sight of the goal, bringing warmth all around. The little farmer boy never grew up, never grew old. His heart beats with God, his soul marches with angels. Almost makes me cry. This one, again, from If I Had a Gun, this one is called Rue de Fleurus, and I don't know if you know what that alludes to, but this is where, and it's a good thing none of my students are online because they do not like Gertrude Stein at all. And if you ever read any Gertrude Stein, you may agree with them. And yes, Gertrude Stein is difficult, but she's still a monument of literature, even if her writing is sometimes incomprehensible on purpose. She still left a mark. She helped Hemingway with his work. She had James Joyce published. She made people like Magritte very famous. I mean, she had a great impact on the Paris art scene. So Rue de Fleurus was a place where she lived. Rue de Fleurus. Words, commas, sentences seemingly incomplete. Grumpy lady, ageless, lost in a sea of paintings, sitting on the same old chair like a master builder. Architect of a new age, syllables became bricks, cemented by chance into the kaleidoscope of voices. Inspiration of a broken time, solidly shut doors. Rough old lady wearing dresses of worn-out burlap, pulling no punches for the unsuspecting wannabe, surrounded by the energy of a generation. Sizing them all up, they walked in for tea and talked. So few knew of the true depth of an unfathomable heart, still found every day in the old apartment on Fleurus. No ghost haunts these streets, for none is large enough to carry with it the legacy of the colossal marble Venus. On the contrary, it is you to be found on every corner. Fragments of a life everywhere, from Appalachia to the lights, cubist in your soul, with your words, as you appear still, piece by piece, you are more wholesome than wholeness could be. Sing, my dear, your dislocated lines, with the voices of automobile engines broken down, lost on a country road, your voices echoes through the ages and warms our rhymes. And just in passing, I don't know if you're familiar with the scene in the 1920s in Paris, but there was a lot of weird art going on. And there was a American musician or composer, his name was George Antheil, and he had airplane engines during concerts. So it was very interesting. People protested and had fights during these concerts. Very interesting stuff. Another one, okay. Well, this one is called My DMZ, and it's a lot worse than it actually is. It sounds worse because this is the road I drive on every day to get home. But it is depressed, right? And it makes me think of a DMZ in a very small way. My DMZ. Never was I in a war to see the bombs kiss the fields, changing the plains of green to everlasting sparks of red. Yet every day I travel through an almost forgotten world, boards on the eyes of old histories, scars in the ground where man once lived. I drive in the safety of my tank, eyeing to old military jargons through a periscope and night vision goggles. Slowly, a spectator more than a fighter. Little's left of hopes and dreams now raised, castles of clapboards and found blocks of mountains. The echo of lives left vacant amid sadness. I have visions of DMZs on the late news shows. A futuristic landscape of apocalyptic films, surrealistic images, truer than harrowing nightmares. It is a place I call home, my land, my living DMZ. So it is a depressed neighborhood. That's pretty much what it is. Let's look at this one here. This is all from If I Had a Gun. And it's called And She Did Love Pretty Things, Really. And this is by mom. So I had mom, dad, and neighbors. Because she was kind of rough around the edges. She had a hard time showing feelings, but she did love pretty things. And I will never forget that about her. And she did love pretty things, really. She hid so much kindness far within herself. Screaming seemed to come more naturally to her. And she did love pretty things, really. It was not a sweet tooth she had, but a mouthful. Impatience almost always got the better of her, and she could taste the savor in all things, really. Her eyes captured nuances in hues and form. Far too often, she let the pain take over and win. But she knew beauty and the delicateness around her. Music was a sweet melody to those ears now silent. If only she had listened to the singing voices nearby. Yet she was so inclined to recognize a symphony. She left her mark in little pieces of a loving one, so loud, so clear on the minute world she left behind. And she did love pretty things, really. And that is what she can no longer hide. This one was written about a man who lived under a bridge. Again, as I exit the DMZ, there's a bridge to get me under the main road, and then I get into my neighborhood, which is different. But there was a man I used to see there every day. He lived under that bridge, and then he has completely disappeared since that. But I did write a poem to him, and it's called The 101st Street Bridge Tenant. Sitting on the edge of his freshly cut Bermuda, he waves uncertain hellos to the drivers, speaking inaudible phrases to who may hear him. Nearby his home of steel on wheels, within his reach reassures him a little, his possessions within his fearful gaze. Thin plastic bags bearing odd coats of arms, from this fancy market in that discount store. Protect treasures he alone can value. Tonight he will dream in black and white, recalling school days perhaps not his own. A home of brick or wood by a stream, but whose? I know just one thing about him who hides behind the reckless hair like a mane. He exists under the bridge as lives speed by. Still, he will remain. When awake again, he will roll in a faded, camouflage sleeping bag to ready for a new day, as if his open-air suite was palatial. That's living under a bridge. Half Past Life. I've only selected one from this one at this point because I didn't know. Okay. So this one is about my grandma and how I lived with her when I was a child. I didn't live with her. I lived with my parents, but my parents lived 2 miles from the school. But in the winter, they thought it was a good idea for me to stay with grandma at night. So I stayed with her, and she fed me instead of going to the cafeteria with the other kids. I was treated to royal meals every day. And I will never forget. She made simple things, but I was a child and I liked them, and she made them for me. And she made macaroni and applesauce, and she put that in the oven. It was delicious. So this poem is called Macaroni and Applesauce. 6 on an old clock, and life is dark. Streets almost dead so soon, but the home of stone shines. It is a known ritual for the boy, a townie for his school days, no need for a bleak cafeteria. The room is small, the table rustic. The lady still tresses her hair into a bun, gray for the decades galloping away. There is no slim plasma on the wall, no song born of a mysterious device, just the crackling of a log in the stove. She does not know central heating nor air, but a warm bed with heating stones and a thick blanket for a cold night. She's the great chef never forgotten, laboring for centuries in her house, always ready with the unlikely delights. Macaroni baked, topped in applesauce, freshly caught sardines grilled on the live fire, and a dreamy kiss at bedtime. So yeah, we may not all think that sardines are great, but when you're 6 years old and they're grilled in the stove, they're pretty good. So I really remember those very well. So let's see. I only picked one from this one. So I'm going to go back to This is from The Temptation of Silence. And last year, actually it's 2 years now, I went to Sedona in Arizona and I walked trails, thinking that I could tackle 12 to 15 miles a day, because that's what I do here. Well, if you've been to Arizona, you know the climate is different. And they say it's dry heat, so it's okay. It's not okay. 100 degrees is 100 degrees. I don't care if it's dry heat. It's deadly, especially with dry heat. But I met people occasionally on the trails. And this is, I think it was a couple that I met, and they were in their 80s. And they didn't walk very far, but they had been living in Sedona, which is, by the way, a luxurious town, which I could never afford to live in, but beautiful to visit. And they didn't live there anymore because it was overcrowded with people from Los Angeles now. So this is trail conversations. How you doing, she asks. Not waiting for the conformist to answer. Too busy taking a sip of her holy water, wrapped in plastic and early morning dew. Good morning, they claim in bright accents from north to south and other climes, boasting those ivory smiles as if tomorrow would never come. Have a good day, the gentleman softly speaks, in the path of a wife of 50 years. But she seems more interested in this lonely sight as I snap another memorable landscape with a super zoom. Voices echo as if words were spoken centuries before. In my head, as they shake my achy muscles, ignorant of my inner thoughts, France for a moment, and soon I cease to exist for the chance encounters of these elusive friends. It is an odd realization, albeit for a mere second, to feel human in the midst of a universe that does not care too much whether they think you good or bad. And that's the neat thing about meeting strangers. Sometimes I feel less lonely when I'm alone like this. I meet strangers than when I'm with people I know. I don't know if that's odd, but other people share that. So, and that one was actually about more people. The one that I was referring to is People on the Rock, of the Rock. This is the elderly couple. So I read that one. It's called People of the Rock. It's also on the path in Sedona Valley. More than 50 years, they say, they have been sharing the same story of love and dislike with this paradise, as more come in to bask in their private sun. Somewhere well north of 80, they persist with the same teenage ventures, resting on a rock the Inquisition would have delighted in when their fires went out in wintry rains. Sharing a makeshift breakfast of granola and applesauce in a bag, they giggle and tell me stories of the old days, good, bad, and ugly, but they return. Their names escape me, their memory does not. Beautiful under concrete wrinkles, they have brought new lives to this land, shared with me an eternity in a glimpse.
That sounds great. Thank you
Okay.
so much for sharing all of those poems from these different collections. It's been really interesting to get a look back into your previously published poems, as well as kind of a look forward into this new release, The Temptation of Silence. While I have you here, I guess I'd love to ask a couple questions. First, from talking to you a bit, I feel like you have a really expansive CV. You're a teacher, an actor. You enjoy doing these really long walks that you wake up early to head out on. So I'm just wondering how the teaching and acting and the rest of your life practices kind of feed into your creative process.
Well, the acting was only for one. I only did one play so far. It was
Not an
very
Oscar
demanding.
win.
It was for 2 months, but so everything. I mean, I wrote poems after the play, and I did write a number of them. I don't know if I've published any of them yet, because it's everything. I always tell students, pay attention to everything. When I drive to work, I see people, and you see that too. Large cities, people are focused on getting to work. They don't pay attention to anything around them. And I don't drive too fast anymore, so I can see details. When I walk, I read a lot. So I read and I walk. I read a lot of books, but while I'm walking, but also pay attention to detail. And that's what I tell students. Every single opportunity that you have, pay attention to details. Pay attention to everything around you. Don't just do one thing because you have to do it and ignore the rest of the world around you. So when I was in the play, I had a lot of discussions with some of the actors and the director and other people behind the scenes, and I observed. And I noticed how chaotic it was backstage, and then how we all came together on stage during the show, and how it was wonderful to the one of the people I worked with closest was a young lady, and we walked off stage together 3 different times, and it was wonderful to walk off stage with her as the character she was, as the character I was. And as soon as we got off stage, well, we were ourselves again, and we talked about other things, or we talked about how it went. So it's interesting to live in these two worlds, and I think we always live in a number of different worlds. And when I walk, I try to not talk to people because I don't want to be distracted, and I don't like small talk anyway. So, but the walks and the being in a play, and when I was in when I did the governor's honors program, I was in a town called Statesboro in Georgia, and I observed again, and I remember seeing 3 people going to the cafeteria in the morning. Each one of them was holding a bottle like this, like one of these you can see, right? And I thought it was interesting. They were all different bottles. One was a Stanley, the other 2 were generic. But I wrote a poem about that because it's so funny to see people carrying bottles of water with them. Is it a fad or is it really necessary? People didn't used to drink that much water, so I'm not really sure. But it's those little details. I wrote poems about some of the students I had. As I said, I've written poems about some of my professors. I don't think I've written poems about my current students, but I need to. So every opportunity. And that's why I think I had a student after the play, because they wait for you, and it was a former student. She was waiting, and she told me, she said, you always tell us to, how did she phrase it? Well, this is what I tell them, but to take chances, to take risks, to try new things all the time. And she looked at me and she said, well, that's what you tell us to do, and you just did. And it's a wonderful thing. And it's a shame when people just don't do that. So try new things, discover new things, and grow. So that's how all these things are related. And from that, if you are any kind of artist, as I'm sure Candace with all the painting she does, everything you do is a result of the life you lead, right? The people you meet, the things you observe. So.
Yeah, I was also noticing you mentioned Charles Baudelaire. He's
Uh-huh.
one of my favorites ever. I love him. I remember I actually used a quote from one of his poems for the beginning of one of my poetry books, and I thought it was so interesting because he was imagining, he was looking at his pipe and the smoke coming up from he was imagining that he's gone now into his pipe, and he's so happy, but now all of a sudden he thinks, my only problem now is how do I get out of here?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I just love that. And then another one I like, and I don't know if you've ever read him, Ernest Dowson.
Nope, I do not.
He's another, he's in that era of Baudelaire, very, very excellent poet.
Yeah. You may remember in this one, actually, we used Baudelaire in the beginning where he said, genius is nothing more nor less than childhood recaptured at will. And I think he's so right. It's so important. That's why I said to my students, I'm 23, it's very important never to grow up, Grow old, maybe, older, right? But grow up, no, there's no reason to.
That's what my daughter says to me. Oh, there she is, the big overgrown child.
Well, I mean, that's a compliment, I think. And I hope she does become that later on, too.
Yeah.
And this is what I find sad about so many people. They're so, and we were too when we're their age, I guess. We're so in a hurry to grow up. And then, I mean, then time stops. If you want it to stop, it stops. And then you can enjoy every day and get older, yeah. And I don't know, maybe have pains here and there, but so what? What matters is not what your body feels, it's what you feel here. So.
Exactly.
And I think, in a way, we may be a lot younger than some of these 20-year-olds, and that's kind of sad.
I agree. I agree. Some of them are they're just so elderly the
Mhm.
way they act, even as teenagers.
Yes,
They're missing out on it all.
they are.
Yeah.
And some people tell me they will realize that in 10, 15 years. They might.
Yeah.
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 So I hope they do.
Yeah.
I loved your advice right at the beginning, Fabrice, the pay attention. It's so simple and so valuable, and I think it leads to everything else, right? We need to kind of pay attention to the world around us and take things in, and then we can be creative and daring and take risks. But I think, first noticing what's outside of ourselves before we can kind of go inwards and creative, and just seeing your work really exemplifies that, because I feel like you've taken so much from your childhood and the people who you have been around, like your students and professors. And, I love the one about your grandmother. That was beautiful. So,
And Einstein, it's on the outside of my door, but he said basically one of the greatest assets of men and women is curiosity.
mm,
And most of those Nobel Prize winners, that's what they talk about, just being curious. And that's what I tell my students: be curious, stay curious. Look at everything, like I said before, and wonder. I mean, I have this cup of coffee here, and I'm not really sure what it's made with. We probably don't want to know, actually, but it's still interesting. How do they make computers? I have no idea, but I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by quantum physics because it's unbelievable what the universe is made of and what we're made of. And we may never know, and probably never will know. But being curious is what keeps us young again.
What I find really interesting, I forget who it was. Somebody gave me a manuscript and then asked a couple of months, and I'd never really read much of Nietzsche, but they had something in this one poem about his theory of eternal reoccurrence,
Mm.
and I started reading up on that, and I like that. I want that to be, so I'm going to believe it is, because I'm going to eternally reoccur.
Yeah. I have students right now working on the romantics, and they have to do a capstone final paper for their graduation. And it's interesting how deep they get into things like this, romantics and primary, secondary imagination, and concepts that are very interesting. We're doing Lacan in class right now, so psychoanalysis. And yeah. Never stop
No,
thinking and being curious. It's really,
I wish we could record our dreams, because sometimes I wake up and I've just got the tail end of it and I can't remember the rest. It would
yeah,
be
I
so
know.
neat if you record it and play it back.
Yeah, yeah. But I guess that's the beauty of dreams. We're not supposed to necessarily remember them all. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, just staying curious. It also keeps people interesting. People who are not curious are boring.
And
Uh,
maybe our dreams are just other dimensionalizations of our lives, because
right.
lately I've been dreaming of, and I was born in 48, so I could never be driving in 1954, but I've been driving this beige 1954 Oldsmobile. It's just ridiculous in my dreams.
That's funny. Yeah, I mean, to me, sometimes I've told students this, when you consider dreams, time does not exist in dreams, right? There's no
Yeah.
notion of time. It's totally distorted. And I tell them this simply: that should make you ask questions about what time really is and why it's actually irrelevant. The
And
only
some scientists say that all time is happening now. So I
right,
believe that. So every day when I get up, I look at my little picture at 1 year old on the side and I say, Candace, listen to your mother. Because I never did. And she only
yeah,
meant all
yeah,
the best. But I think it's all happening now. So I think I've affected my life back there to bring me where I am today.
yeah. Time is just something we constructed so that we could get to work on time
Yeah. Yeah.
and have an hour of talk, and it's kind of sad. I have dinner with a friend occasionally, and he's always, okay, I gotta go home. It's like, okay, life
Yeah.
shouldn't be about that, you know.
No.
I mean, sometimes it has to be, because sometimes you need to go to bed. But it's so sad, and again, most people live their lives that way. And academia, we have to teach certain times, but we also we teach 28 weeks a year, so we get a lot of time off.
Oh,
And
that's nice.
that's a luxury that a lot of people do not have. And I'm thankful for it because, again, in dreams, there's no such thing as time. So to me, I think sometimes dreams, they're not so unreal as we think they are, you know?
I believe it. I
Yeah.
believe it.
So, so
And
anyway.
I read somewhere too, this may or may not be, but I like to think it is, for every action that if you choose to go right, another part of you goes straight and another part of you goes left. So, and then those create their more realities and more. I
Yeah.
really love that thought. It could be all over the place and enjoying everything.
Have you seen the film Interstellar?
I might have. I've gotten to an age now where I'm forgetting what I've seen, so I'm
It's
actually
10 years old
watching.
already, but it's about traveling into another galaxy within a wormhole. And it's very
Yeah.
scientific. It's not just a joke and some silly science fiction film. It's extremely scientific. The things that they talk about are scientifically true. Are they true in real life? We don't really know. But they have observed things like that. And they believe that, as Einstein said, time slows down when you go faster. And that's kind of a part of the film.
And
And
then there's when you the certain quarks and muons and electrons, they're not observed unless you're looking at them.
right,
They're
right.
only there if you look at them. Otherwise, they're not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like Schrödinger's scat, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That, yeah. It's fascinating. I mean, I don't believe that there's no reality outside of us because some people suggested, as soon as we get off this call, I won't exist anymore. I'm only a figment of your imagination, and so are you of mine. I don't think that's true at all. Um,
No.
but there's something to be said about perceptions of reality. I mean, I tell students, we have 8 billion people on this planet. We have 8 billion different realities.
Yeah. And if they're all branching off, think of the
Right.
trillions.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's, I mean, I was watching a show yesterday talking about chess, and chess has an infinite combination of moves.
Mhm.
And I think it is actually infinite because they were talking about how after 9 moves, there was like trillions of possible combinations.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So that's why I stopped playing chess.
Yeah, I stopped one of my former, well, years ago when I was married to my first husband, he wanted to play chess, so we started to play it. And I got lucky and I won a few. And he got really mad. And he went into another room and he came back 20 minutes later. He said, okay, let's start again. And I guess he looked some up some particular moves to really get somebody right away. He had me in 6 moves. I couldn't believe it. And
Yeah.
I said, how'd you do that? He says, well, I just started thinking, but I found that book later that he read.
Well, some people memorize games, and that's not
Yeah.
fair.
Well, that's
So
no fun either.
no, it isn't. No, it's just too much work.
Yeah.
Uh, so, but
Now
anyway,
here's what I love about this reality is you're doing what you're doing. Don't everything you're doing there on the side, it's like two different worlds because everything changes. Like your hand goes through the grass and
oh
then
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's so cool.
yeah. It's interesting how these backdrops work. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Anyhow,
yeah. Do we have any more questions for Fabrice before we wrap up? Candace, is there anything you've been dying to ask?
yeah, not really. I think we've kind of said it all.
Yeah.
I'm just really, really happy that we've published 4 of Fabrice's books because they really are so, I can't really say so different. They're really actually head and shoulders, perceptual wise, above the average. They're really wonderful. Really
Thank you,
wonderful.
thank you. I
Yeah.
mean, I sometimes I reread those things like the ones that I read today, and of course I stumble, but who doesn't? But sometimes I read these and I think, man, this is pretty good, and it's really hard to think that of your own work, you know.
I know. Yeah.
So when you do, you must have done some like "If I Had a Gun." I love that poem, and I
Oh,
don't.
yeah.
We don't usually love the stuff we do, you know.
Yeah.
So it's nice to go back. I have sometimes I have poems that are published, and I'm thinking, why did they actually publish this? I reread it, I'm thinking this is not very good, but it's published. Or I forgot what it's about. That happens too.
Well, what I find with I've sold pieces of art in different little shows we've had around here, and some of them, there was one particular, this really blew my mind. We didn't have enough hanging on this one rack, and Janet said to me, can you run home and get another painting? And I said, sure. So I went home and I just grabbed this one. I thought, I'll stick it down at the bottom. It was a lousy painting. And it had a ratty frame too, just dumb. Put it on the bottom, and the guy that was very high up in one of the arts councils around this area, he bought that one. And it just blew my mind. I thought, I can't believe anybody liked that painting. It was just ridiculous, actually. I called it a rainforest phoenix. It was like a odd looking bird coming up through a bunch of rain with a palm tree. It was just ridiculous. And he bought
The
it.
thing you never know, right? You never
I
know.
know. So now I'm ready to go over some paint. I say to my daughter, I'm taking this over to drop in today. I'm going to paint over it. She says, don't paint over anything. Somebody might like that. And it's true. You just don't know. It's in the eye of the beholder.
Right. I mean, I've had poems that I submitted and I thought of retiring, and I tried one more time, and suddenly somebody said, "Yeah, we'll take that."
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah. But I have some. There's one I want to retire right now. It's getting on my nerves. But
Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure working with your creative mind, Fabrice. You just reading your stuff and publishing it and going over it because I read it quite a few times, going over editing, looking, and I just really enjoy reading your work.
thank you again, and I enjoy seeing yours. So I need to get back to you one of these days, hopefully soon, after school ends, perhaps.
Yeah,
And
and you've now become a favored person in my tier of things, so you can choose some paintings you want, and they'll be only cost you the shipping.
all right,
Yeah.
and tariffs, right?
What was that? Oh,
Tariffs.
tariffs. No,
I
no
have to.
tariff. No, because I'm going to send them I'll send it as a gift, so you shouldn't have to pay anything.
I'm kidding. It's just
See,
eh,
that's where one of those things went way over my head. I forgot. I just didn't
yeah,
grab
yeah.
onto it.
I mean, with the
Yeah,
way things are today, it's just too easy to make fun of those
yeah,
situations.
yeah.
So, and hopefully we'll go back to sanity pretty soon.
Yeah, well, I don't really care now because I figure I'm on my way out. I mean, I'm not sick or anything.
All right, right.
I'm on that other. And do you know if we live to be 100 years old, we've only lived 1,200 months. And when you look at it that way, it's not much.
Yeah, that's depressing. But how many seconds?
Oh, I haven't
Million.
done that. Yeah. But then there's so many seconds where I can't even remember what I thought a few
Well, the
seconds
funny thing
ago.
too is we spend a third of our lives sleeping. So you're talking about 33 years totally
Yeah.
unconscious. And that's kind of
Yeah.
sad too.
I never thought of that. Third of our life sleeping. Yeah.
You only spend about 66 years awake, you know?
Yeah. And then when we're sleeping, we're just in another dimension, probably.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Megan's riding her bike through the Universal Stars. She's a world renowned cyclist. Goes over to Morocco and all over the place.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm
I would
just gonna.
cycle too, but it's not safe around here. There's too many cars. I
Yeah.
used to cycle a lot, but not around here. So,
Yeah, you can't anymore. We've got these things in our city now, and they're really bad for cars because they're bike stalls that are parked on corners and they're green. They're called lime bikes. And
Mm.
somebody puts their $2 or whatever in and that gives them so much time. And there's all these little stations where they can park the bikes and take the bikes. And it's really cluttering up the streets. And they're electric bikes.
right, right, right.
Yeah. Oh, well. Anyway, I guess Megan's dying to get on her bike
Oh
again right
no,
about.
I have been recording this whole time, so you might have to go and edit this, Candace.
Yeah, it might be fun though too, you know. Oh,
Yeah,
I
for
know what I
sure.
wanted to ask you. You mentioned
Oh,
Jack in one of your poems. Remember this, Fabrice? Old Jack?
Yeah,
What was Jack's last name?
not Nicholson. Um, oh, now you're asking me a question I can't remember. Jack. Oh, crap.
Because I was thinking it would be kind of nice to put him up on the thing, so his name's up there too. So somewhere in eternity
Yeah,
he'll live on.
I'll remember. I'll email you. I'll email you because I can't remember right now. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I
well, I
can
guess I'll
keep
just
space.
Yeah, I'll say that that wraps up our launch for The Temptation
Yep.
of Silence with Silverwood Publishing. We're really excited that you were able to join us today, Fabrice and Candace. This book and several of the author's other books are available in print and ebook from Silverbow Publishing. So check out silverbowpublishing.com or contact your local retail bookstore or library and ask them to order a copy from Ingram Distribution. And that's all. Thanks so much for joining us.
Well,
And
thank you
that's
for
it.